Hello friends, Tal here and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be talking about reactionary tanking. The negatives, the positives, and potentially the problems with this style of tanking. Now, the class that best exemplifies this type of tanking and has since their very introduction as the true tanking spec for the class is Blood DKs. Since Cataclysm, they've had a very reactionary, self-healing style of tanking that from a lot of people has been very enjoyable and has proven to be very, very powerful since it was conceived basically in Cataclysm. Since they moved over from Wrath of the Lich King, changed up their specs a little bit, and made Blood the definitive tanking spec. And it's actually interesting because Demon Hunters are coming into the game borrowing a little bit of that same self-healing style from Death Knights, but at the end of the day, DK is still the definitive one, and it's the one that I think is going to be best used as an example here in this video that I'm going to be talking about today. So first of all, let's talk about what reactionary tanking is. It's basically where your best mitigation or the way that you deal with tanking bosses or deal with mechanics is to take the hit and then respond very quickly to the hit and intelligently to keep yourself alive. Best indicated by Deathstrike. Essentially what Deathstrike used to do was, depending on how much damage you've taken in the last couple of seconds, you heal yourself for a percentage of that damage, you put an absorb shield on you, and used properly, you could end up putting huge amounts of healing on you. And again, since Cataclysm, Death Knights have always had huge healing numbers, sometimes rivaling other healers, and have always been very self-sufficient and powerful because of it. To go along with that, they've always had cooldowns to help them through the more difficult moments. Of course, they need to be able to survive a hit to be able to heal after it. Whereas some warriors or paladins would mitigate the hit from the beginning, DKs would take it to the face and then heal it back up and be just fine, essentially. Now, that was changed a little bit going into things like Mists of Pandaria and then into Warlords of Draenor, where it was kind of a set amount of healing that you would do. It would get boosted up depending on your mastery and everything else, but it has gone back into a very heavily dependent last few seconds of damage you've taken style going into Legion, and there could potentially be some problems. Now, a lot of people really like reactionary tanking. Okay, and the reason for that is that it can feel very fun and powerful in the right hands. Being intelligent about the fight mechanics, knowing what's coming up and how to respond to it, you can feel like an unstoppable god. And honestly, Blood DKs have almost always had that kind of archetype built into them. They're the tank that'll stay alive at the end. They're the one that doesn't need as much attention as the healer from the healers. They're just this unmovable, unshaking, unwavering knight that stays alive, and even exemplified more by talents such as Purgatory, which keeps them alive after they've sustained fatal damage, and they can be healed out of it and stay alive. It's a get out of jail free card that activates for you. It's very thematic, very powerful thing, and it's honestly a lot of fun playing a Blood DK because of it. But it is not without its faults. What I can remember, mind you, this is not something that I personally experienced because I wasn't tanking on a Blood DK in Cataclysm or specifically the Firelands, but I remember the horror stories of DKs having the issue where sometimes they just couldn't live through the hits. The tank mechanics were unfair in a sense that they didn't have the time to heal themselves up from the hit. They couldn't just take the hit to the face and be okay later on. No, they would take the hit and die, and they were never given that opportunity to heal themselves up, to shine, essentially. Now, given what we've been told about Legion bosses and Blizzard's intention for how the bosses should work, burst damage, and the relationship between tanks and healers, that shouldn't happen again during Legion. But as we all know, things that shouldn't happen don't always have a tendency to not happen. The problem I see is that Blizzard has a history of a certain couple of things. One of them being that their best laid plans become amok. They get ruined almost immediately. And usually that ends up happening because items scale completely out of control. And you have to understand something. We have artifacts with traits. We have relics with random traits that give a bonus to any one of the little traits besides the golden ones in your artifact. You have legendary items. You have the inevitable middle or end tier raid that has the crazy trinkets and all those crazy set bonuses. And you have war forging and titan forging and gem sockets. You have so many different variables this time. I cannot see something becoming too out of hand, going crazy. It's actually one of the reasons that I think that they went ahead and nerfed Guardian Druid Mastery a little bit, because under the right circumstances, it would scale out of control. And if you have one tank that has multiple millions more HP than the other tanks, there's a problem. And that's what I potentially see happening. There's too many variables. They've dug themselves into a corner. Maybe it's a little bit more of a fun corner because there's all these different things that could happen and these potentially really awesome stat rolls and everything. But at the same time, having to take into account all these variables is going to be ridiculous. So that's the big worry there. Legion bosses shouldn't burst someone down so hard that reactionary tanks, specifically the Blood DKs, cannot react. But, we have to actually see it be played out and find out if that's true or not. The good thing is, for the most part, tank balance is actually pretty good. It's pretty solid. I'm going to actually do another video after this one, specifically going into detail on tank balancing, like my last final thoughts before the expansion launches. But for the most part, it's good. And something that I do have to say is DKs have some of the best talents. Not necessarily in the sense that, you want to switch them out all the time because, this is great in this situation, that's great in that. For the most part, I feel that they have a pretty standard, like, this is what you usually run with. But where it's good is that you can take certain things like Rune Tap, or you can take Tombstone, where it's like, okay, for this specific boss, for whatever reason, I'm getting trucked on this ability. I don't have the opportunity to heal myself back up after it. Let me just take Rune Tap and take less damage. I'll have to give up one of my other talents that I'm always taking, but it won't be hitting me as hard, and it gives my healers and myself the time to heal myself. Let me take Tombstone. Yes, I'm going to drop all my Bone Shield charges, but maybe it's the third stack of a tank debuff. I can use all my Bone Shield charges, give myself a big absorption shield, live through the hit, my tank taunts, and now you don't have to worry. You build up your Bone Shield again. Those types of choices and situations where cookie cutter things will not always fit into every single situation. And that's something important that I want you guys to understand. Remember that all my content is geared towards mythic rating and things. Cookie cutter builds and everything is like, oh, you always take this talent. You can adjust that depending on what the strat is for your team, for the fight, for anything that's happening, for the weakness that you see. I feel having those types of talents is fantastic, and that's why I think Blood DK has one of the best talent trees in general. So that's a positive thing. At least they have the tools available to deal with some of the situations if they come up. And beyond that, Blood DKs are just very, very powerful and fantastic tanks already. What I wanted to specifically address with this video is that sometimes, even though a tank is designed a certain way, Blizzard sometimes has the misstep of designing encounters, not taking them into account, and it can hurt them unfairly. Now again, I'm not saying Blood DKs are bad. I'm not saying, they need buffs or they need nerfs. I'm saying they're fun, they're fantastic when played right, they have a lot of strengths, but I just don't want encounter designs to screw them over in the long run. Honestly, at the end of the day, time is going to tell. The encounters, the little mini raid that's coming up, which, spoiler alert, I'm pretty sure as hell yeah, Emerald Nightmare, time will tell, and especially the balance changes that happen before raids, during raids, after raids, that's what's going to decide everything. But for the most part, I just wanted to go ahead and explain a little bit of the history of reactionary tanking, explain my thought process on it, and just give you guys an idea of what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about all the tanks, because I have a lot of these types of thoughts in my head. I'm always thinking about all these different things and seeing how they may pertain to my raid and myself, my team, and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Have a good one. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and drop it a like. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this. And I want to thank the time each and every single one of you took out of your day to go ahead and watch this, as well as a very special thank you to my Patreon patrons who continue to make this dream a reality through their monthly continued support. If you'd like to go ahead and become a Patreon patron, you can go ahead and click right there on the logo. It'll take you right to the page. And other than that, you can go ahead and tweet me or follow me at Tauriel here on Twitter. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, fantastic day. See you guys around.
Turns to gray, we'll calmly walk away from the fray. When structure falls and all else fails, we will build it once again.